Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Molly and Eric in Arcane Circus.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for being here today, and welcome to our presentation, Chicken in the Wall, Pataphysics, the Science of Imaginary Solutions. So who are we, Eric?
Well, I'm Eric.
I'm Molly, and together we are
Arcane Circus,
a two-person team based in the Netherlands. We've made games such as Crap I'm Broke, Hodag Snag, Kimono and Chibi-chan Save the World, and Shooty. But you're not here to learn about us, you're here to learn about pataphysics, the science of imaginary solutions. So after this quick introduction, I'm going to tell you what pataphysics are, give you some examples, and talk about pataphysics in games. Then I'm going to turn you on to Eric, who's going to give you some pataphysical exercises and ways you can apply pataphysics to your own games, and then a couple of final thoughts. Let's get straight into it. Starting with, what are pataphysics? Well, pataphysics were invented by this crazy Frenchman, Alfred Jarry. He was an absurdist in the early 20th century Paris. He was very well known for his outrageous plays, such as Ubu Roi. Is that right?
Ubu Roi.
Roi. He was also known for being a strange person. Yes. He had a lot of things that he did that were very odd. Here's a few examples. He filled his apartment with owls because they're nocturnal like him. He ate all his meals backwards from dessert to soup. And when he died at the age of 34, his final words in French were, "I am dying, please bring me a toothpick." An absurdist until the end. But Alfred Jarry's accomplishment that we're most interested in today is the creation of pataphysics, the science of imaginary solutions. Pataphysics was first coined in this book, Exploits and Opinions of Dr. Faustrol, Pataphysician, which is written by Jarry in 1898. It's kind of about a pataphysician and his research into pataphysics, but to say this book has a plot is kind of stretching it. There's people dying and coming and being born on the same moment, and people's heads falling off because they don't know who somebody is, and monkeys, and we are talking about Alfred Jarry here. It's where pataphysics started. That's the most important thing. There's a couple of potential origins and word plays for what pataphysics means, but the funnest one we think is pataphysique, not your physics. Further trying to explain what pataphysics are, Jarry described it as a universe which can be, and perhaps should be, envisioned in the place of a traditional one. Now, here's the thing, pataphysics are really hard to understand, let alone explain. So maybe an easier way to explain to you guys what pataphysics are is to give some examples of pataphysical situations. Let's start with this one. In Labyrinth, we have David Bowie, and here comes a pataphysical moment. Whoop! That's pataphysical, what happened there. Let's do it one more time. See David Bowie, here I come, gonna get you. David Bowie. It's David Bowie. Oh my gosh. Here's another example, the manga Kawa. Now, in the manga, they fight this giant monster guy who they can't defeat, bullets bounce off of him, and they can't defeat him. But Kawa figures out that if you whistle, he turns small, and then that guy's able to whoop his ass. Finally, here's an excerpt from Through the Looking Glass. I'm going to read it to you. The shop seemed to be full of all manner of curious things, but the oddest part of it all was that, whenever she looked hard at any shelf to make out exactly what it had on it, that particular shelf was always quite empty, though the others around it were crowded as full as they could hold. So imagine that, shop, the shelf's full, and as soon as you look at something, it's empty, while everything else is full. All of these examples that we just gave make absolutely no sense in our world, but they make perfect sense in a pataphysical world, a world that operates on its own rules and has rules and solutions which are imaginary. Now here's the thing. Pataphysics is kind of not meant to be taken seriously. If you have questions, yeah, but what about this and that? Look, here's the thing. It's kind of a philosophical prank. It's not a watertight scientific definition. It's kind of meant not to be taken seriously. But that doesn't mean it isn't important, and it doesn't raise interesting questions about the world and what we do. History has a bunch of philosophical pranks. For example, Pastafarianism, which some of you might be familiar with. Pastafarianism is a religion that's recognized in several countries where people worship flying spaghetti monsters. And it raises really important questions about religion's place in public schools and how society will make exceptions for religion and things like that. And also, pataphysics was really important for influencing art movements that came after it. It was a big influence for dadaists, futurists, surrealists, and video games. Yes, all of you video game developers here make use of pataphysics, whether you know it or not. And we're going to explain to you how. So, pataphysics and games. So to recap, also for the people who've just walked in, pataphysics is a universe which can be, and perhaps should be, envisioned in the place of the traditional one. Video games are realities simulated by technology that could be as similar or dissimilar to our own world. Now, there's 2 equal signs up there. Eric made me put 2 equal signs because I only had one because it bothered him because he's a programmer. I'm not a programmer, I don't get the joke, but some people seem to appreciate the joke, so. But back to pataphysics. So if you compare these 2 definitions, they seem pretty similar, almost interchangeable. And it's incredible to think that Jarry in the 1890s, who had no internet, no computers, nothing even close to it, was able to create this imaginary thing that came just over half a century later in the form of video games. It's incredible. So pataphysics and games. I'm going to give you a couple of examples of pataphysics in video games, bringing it back to our lovely medium. Now, of course, there's the namesake of this presentation, the chicken in the wall. In Castlevania, you can whip walls open, and there's fully cooked pieces of chicken, and you eat the chicken, and then your fatal wounds are cured. There's Super Mario Brothers. Oh my god, this game is full of pataphysics. Mushrooms that you eat that make you grow, and jumping up in the air and making bricks appear out of nowhere and money flying out of it. Even common things in games like one-ups and lives and dying and then kind of coming back, but also kind of back in time. Like, there's a lot of things in video games that we as gamers just go, yeah, that makes sense, because we see them all the time, and yet they're so pataphysical. Silent Hill has sound cues. Sirens, right?
Yeah, the world will transition once the sirens will sound into a hellscape.
Yeah, exactly. When sirens sound in this game, then the world is transformed into a hellish version of itself. And Katamari Damacy has the Katamari, which is able to suck up things that are smaller than it to grow until it's able to roll up people and then buildings and then continents and then turn them into stars. These are all examples that you guys are very familiar with, and sometimes it can be difficult to kind of see the ludicrousy in something that we as game developers and gamers are familiar with. So here's a game that a lot of you may not be familiar with, Attack of the Mutant Penguins for the Atari Jaguar. I found out about this game through the Angry Video Game Nerd, and he can explain this crazy game a lot better than we could, so we're going to let him do the talking.
Anyone who knows this game?
All right.
Okay.
Looking for a treat.
Let's see.
Attack of the Mutant Penguins. I gotta admit, the name alone got my attention. But what the hell's going on? From what I understand, there's a bunch of penguins walking around. They buy tickets and then go into a transformation booth where they become evil mutant penguins. And from there, they go to the doom scale. Yeah, the doom scale. They jump in the mouth and then appear on the scale. So you gotta stop the penguins by using a weapon, for example, a baseball bat. How do you get the bat? You gotta collect letters that spell the word bat. Where do you find the letters? Inside treasure chests. But how do you open the treasure chests? A key, right? No, gremlins. Yeah, you collect what they call gremlins, and supposedly you drop the gremlins inside the treasure chest and then it opens. But no, it doesn't open right away. It takes like 10 seconds. The more gremlins you use, the faster it opens. But it doesn't open, it like explodes. When you get the bat, you gotta kill all the penguins, but they don't die if you hit them. Instead, there's a bunch of power orbs that scatter all over. You gotta get all the power orbs to power up your bat so you can kill the penguins. But you only kill the penguins wearing hats because the ones that don't wear hats fight the ones that do wear hats. If the mutant penguins on the doom scale outweigh the regular penguins, the doom scale starts screaming and going apeshit.
So yeah, that's a thing. I swear, if Alfred Jarry was alive now and making games, he would make games like Attack of the Mutant Penguins. So all of these examples of pataphysics in games that we've shown you, no matter how crazy and wild, they're not total they're not total nonsense. The games do follow rules, and they follow their crazy rules consistently. And that's essentially what games are, a system of rules. But the way that they represent those rules could be anything. It can be beyond the real world. And when you see this, it's almost as if games are pataphysics. So that's all the theory out of the way. I'm going to pass you on to Eric now, who's going to give you some practical exercises and thought processes that you can use to apply pataphysics to your own games. So go ahead, Eric.
Thank you, Mo. So now you have an idea of what pataphysics might be. So first, let's start off with trying to get ourselves into that mindset to think in a pataphysical way that we can perhaps then apply to our games. So you would start off with the question, you want to start making a game and you want to make use of pataphysics, but you have to kind of convince yourself of this reality that still has to be defined. And how does one go about that? You want to indulge yourself into a reality that is not set here. So one thing we like to mention is there's a lot to be gained from you and yourself. There's this core that everybody will have that they can really tap into that makes you the uttermost you. And everybody has a unique way of looking at the world. The associations that you make and the observations that you make might seem obvious to you, but not to others. And this is something that you can really utilize to, make very strange connections, perhaps, to others, and use that in your game design specifically. So I know it's a really good example from They Live, where, he looks at the world completely different than everybody else does. How to do that? We've done a talk before. It's called Your Greatest Asset When Making Games, You. And we've done this at Indie Gamil in 2015, but it's available on YouTube. So if you are curious how to get to that core of yourself, there's a couple of tips that we have. It's quite a lot, which is why we can't really go into too much detail about that, but let's move on. So, your dreams. Your dreams are a really great source of this pataphysical inspiration, because your dreams are your subconscious associations that you will make. Because, your memories, your day-to-day existence, they basically all intertwine into this one reality. Things that are completely disconnected, but will form into this one whole. A good example to kind of illustrate how that will manifest is this clip from Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, where Jim Carrey as the protagonist, those who know the movie, he's going through memory removal, but the kind of segments they show is very reminiscent of basically how your dreams would work. All these disconnected elements from similar memories will form into this one reality. So it can be quite intriguing. Also, to go back to the surrealism from Jarry, being the surrealist and absurdist he is, the surrealists also made games, which is pretty cool, just like us. And they used this subconscious as their core mechanic. And let's go from left to right. Let's start with the exquisite corpse. Perhaps there's some people who already done that when they were kids. You'd fold an A4 into 3, and then one starts off with drawing the head, and then fold that over. Next one draws the body, and then the head, and then the feet. And then you will result into this weird contraption. So that's one of them, but it gets a bit weirder with the automatic writing, the middle one. Basically, what you can do that with pen or paper or with your computer, and you start writing everything that will come up into your mind, and you do not stop. You just keep writing, even nothing comes into your mind. You just keep going, really trying to tap into that subconscious. The third one is an interesting one. Just a little example. If I were to ask you to close your eyes, this is how the game works. So you close your eyes, and there's someone at the door. Knock, knock, someone at the door. Who is it? And I will reveal this person, and you will have to immediately tell whether you will let this person in, yes or no, and explain immediately why. For instance, knock, knock, who's there? Elvis Presley. No, I will not let him in because he's smelly and his albums are made of plastic. I don't know. That's tapping into that immediate subconscious, so just, no inhibitions, what's it that you could call that?
Yeah, without inhibition.
Yeah. So we have a great book with us. It's this one, which is basically some of these games that we just mentioned are a collection of the surrealist games from that time period, also when Jarry was alive. So if you want to play some pataphysical, some surrealist games, I'd say check them out with us. Come play.
Yeah, we have it with us, so if anybody wants to play some games with us afterwards, then come up to us and we'll play with you.
And you could do drugs. Hallucinogenic substances. Absinthe, ether, LSD, mushrooms, you name it. But the whole point of this is when you hallucinate, it kind of is reminiscent of when you are dreaming. You are making these subconscious associations that will turn into these weird things like, whoa, man, I'm tripping balls. I mean, that is something you can do.
Just saying.
Just saying. So once you put yourself in that pataphysical mindset, okay, how does one go about applying it? What does that result into? Let's go through an example. For instance, in a game, you want to be able to fly. Okay. How does that work? How do you fly? For instance, okay, wings. But that's a bit, it's quite derivative. We know that wings, because, wings make you fly because birds can fly. Okay, let's be a bit more absurd. Headphones. How do headphones make you fly? Okay, this is a challenge that we need to now back-engineer why this would work and be logical in this pataphysical world. This is what I came up with. Headphones allow you to play music. If you play specific types of music, then you will feel uplifted. You will feel uplifted, you actually become lighter. When you become light enough, you can fly. So as you see, there is now logic to this absurd reality. And this is consistent. Now that we've just defined from this moment into this, as a game design, then you can start analyzing this. Because every subset, all these steps represent rules. There's a rule set. So let's analyze this. Okay, you need headphones to be able to listen to music or audio. So when do you obtain this headphone? Could it serve a different purpose? Is it a kind of protection? Can it play color? Even more pataphysical. The music. Music makes you feel uplifted, therefore makes you light. What other types of music could there be that would result into a different reaction? That is something you could ask yourself. When you become light, you can fly. How does one fly? Do you need to kind of like push yourself forward or something? How would that work? How long can you stay in the air? Does that immediately stop when you take off your headphones? And those are all kind of questions, and you can just ask yourself, just purely based from that initial crazy association. So this is indirect. It's quite indirect. So let's let this sink in for a little bit and go to the final thought. So, what can we conclude from this? There's a lot that you had to kind of take in at this point, and if you still don't quite know what pataphysics is about, that's all right, because Andrew Hugel has the following to say. He says, to understand pataphysics is to fail to understand pataphysics, and to define it is merely to indicate a possible meaning. So what he means by that is you as a creative individual, you can just create your own logic and own reality. That's the whole point of it. If you try to define pataphysics, that would be saying, okay, this one definition would encompass the entire all the possibilities of imaginary solutions. It's a bit ballsy, it's a bit much. So, it's meant to be interpreted by you and how you want to take it. So it's important for you as a creator to be more aware that pataphysics are quite, closely connected to video games, and that that this is something that's part of it. You would have more control over the intended experience that you would be creating. For instance, you can kind of see then how Attack of the Mutant Penguins and Silent Hill would differ from each other the way they implemented. Perhaps Silent Hill is a little bit more subtle. Attack of the Mutant Penguins a bit more absurd. So knowing that, how it applies those pataphysical realities allows you to gain more control over what you want. And I want to leave you with a question. So these pataphysics, how can you make pataphysics more significant to your game than just using it to function as quirky visuals to represent the rules? I think these two games here on the left is Another World, and on the right, Heart of Darkness, made by Eric Chahi. And he manages to really use the pataphysics, just the very few that he uses, is spread out and consistent throughout the entire world and narrative of the game, making it all the more stronger that you constantly get in touch with those same realities. I'd say observe some of these games. This is a good example, I think. So, we're done with talking. We want to hear about what you have to say about pataphysics, what your pataphysical game ideas are. So, we have a hashtag, not your physics, pataphysics. So we'd love to hear what you guys come up with. And let's go to some conclusions. Pataphysics, basically elves can smell purple. Staring too hard into mirrors will allow you to see your future. And bananas will become snakes when exposed to sulfuric acid. Thank you very much. If you want to contact us, you can always send us an email at info@Arcane Circus or contact Molly HC and at Eric.
Yep.
Circus. Yeah. Thank you very much. And I believe there's time for questions.
Okay, any questions?
Things we need to clarify.
Was it that good? We answered every question that could ever be answered with this presentation.
We can see. Is that on?
Yeah.
Oh, I can't tell from here. Maybe a dumb question. What's your favorite pataphysical construct that you've encountered in any sort of medium?
In any sort of medium. Oof, it's quite broad. I think also some of these examples that we use, like what's it from, Labyrinth, has a lot of those kind of pataphysical aspects of it. Your favorite one, Alice in Wonderland, is something that really
Oh yeah, well
that.
Alice in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass are my favorite books, period. So I really love them. I do also really love Heart of Darkness, because which was the one with the kid pushing the shadow, because there's so many pataphysical things in that game, and yet it just constantly, like, it's consistent throughout the world. It never feels like really wacky and trying to be crazy. Like, it all works. So I think as far as games go, Heart of Darkness is a good one, and I suggested that one when we were looking for examples. But I would say Alice in Wonderland for me.
Any more questions? Or things you want to share?
Yeah.
That's also,
if anyone has any cool pataphysical game ideas, you can share them now.
Share your thoughts.
I'm going to keep them to themselves and make it into a game.
I think something I also find interesting to see as we were working on this presentation was how much pataphysics is integrated into lots of different media. I still find that really cool to see. The examples that we used before, I was just scattered throughout literature and comics and film, you know, like it's so great to see the imaginary solutions that people have gone through to be able to, like, it's so great to see all these possibilities.
And how connected it is to games as well.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, we already knew it was connected to games, and that's why we made this presentation. But as we were researching it and really, like, defining things clearly so we could explain to other people, there was a moment where I had to take a break because I was like, games and pataphysics are like the same thing. What the fuck?
Yeah. All right.
Okay.
That be it. Thank you very much for attending, and we'll see you around.